I'm Gianna Monet, and we are here at the Global Esports Industry Week, where some of the top leaders in esports are meeting. Today we are here with Daniel Kapadia, who is also known as DDK. Daniel, could you tell us a little bit more about how you got into esports?
I started off as a professional player, and for me, it's like the merging of two passions, just video games and competition. When I was really young, and I just immediately, after just competing online before it was even really a thing, I was like, I want to just beat everyone. So I just kept trying to do that, and eventually got good enough to be one of the best players in the UK, and got signed to a team, and that kind of put me on that track. But back when I was doing it, you couldn't really command the kind of salaries and living that you could now. So it was still sort of felt like a pipe dream. And so I ended up kind of going to university, trying to figure life out. That didn't really work out. And so then eventually, after dropping out of law school, I was like, okay, maybe I should try doing content or something, so fill the time with that. And then that kind of led into, after making content for about a year, it led into a broadcast position very, very early on in around 2012 with Face It, when they had just started their first broadcast, essentially. And they zipped me over to Milan, tried me out. They're like, this seems pretty cool. Would you want to come and work for me full time? And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do that. I'll move to Milan. Let's do that. And back then the salary was like measly, like $600 a month, and they provided the accommodation. It was very tough back then, but as we can see now, the industry has really bloomed, and I've worn many hats. Also been a general manager for a couple of years, running the program for one of the top teams in North America. And I'm super involved in the performance space, trying to push the envelope in esports performance, and trying to help players understand how to get better, coaching players, helping teams resolve issues with performance, as well as doing all of the talent work and commentary for different games. And so I'm really, for the last 20 years, I've done a lot in esports, and it's definitely in my blood.
Yeah, and you said you went to law school, or you were originally going to law school?
I was going, and I dropped out after a couple of years.
Okay, what is that dynamic like going from a whole different world to a different environment? Like, what was that like for you?
I think, for me, I think it was interesting because back then I was, like I said, back then it felt like a pipe dream. Everyone had been telling me, especially in the UK, where it was a lot less developed than other areas in the world at that time. I was being told by everybody, why are you spending your time doing this? It's not going to go anywhere. And so I kind of believed that. I really believed that, because there really wasn't an industry that existed or was possible for it to exist until Twitch, the birth of Twitch, from Justin TV to Twitch around 2011, 2012. And then suddenly you have this way to aggregate all the viewership on this one platform, and you can now sell against this aggregated viewership, and suddenly an industry actually sprouted out from that. And that was kind of the exact time that I started really getting into commentary. And so it took a few years to kind of get there, but in terms of the comparison between that and law, I think for me it was mostly just that I couldn't see a future in that, because although it was intellectually stimulating, and I'm a very analytical person by nature, and that scratched that itch, there's something missing there for me. And so and I had been talked out of for years of my own passion in a way, whereas and so when I started kind of doing that role, I was even wrestling with it, because like I was saying early on, it didn't really seem viable. And so there's many times when I considered that I should potentially quit, but fortunately I didn't, and managed to have so many amazing experiences in life, doing stuff like you mentioned. I was working with Turner Sports for some time, doing stuff on American television, which I never thought would be a thing. We had a studio right next to the inside the NBA guys. We were working with the same talent manager that handles all of those guys, like Ernie Johnson and Charles Barkley and Shaq and all the rest. And that was a surreal experience. Or doing tournaments all different studios all around the world. I just came back from Kazakhstan. I never expected I would go there for a tournament. So there's so many experiences I've had, fortunately, by sticking it out and kind of seeing where we go.
With your background and listening to how you got here, could you tell us how important community is through esports, and what it means to you and what you currently do?
Yeah, I think community is very important in esports. I think I've definitely seen a lot of different versions of it, because for me, when I first started competing, it was something that for me it was the competition of it was fulfilling, but the competition itself doesn't really mean anything unless there are a body of people around it to celebrate it, to witness the spectacle of it, to be competing against people that understands the passion uniquely in the way that you do. And for me, when I was growing up and I started doing all of this, it was also I'd lots of familial strife and so on and so forth, and so for me it was a way to competing was a way for me to generate self-esteem, and and also, you know, I didn't connect with a lot of the kids at school and all the rest of it, and so that felt really alien to me. But I had, you know, this community where, you know, I was going and like winning, and to me the kind of meritocracy of competition in that respect was very important to get that self-esteem, but then to be validated by this community of people, and you know you get to meet people all over the world with all types of different interests, and it's very comforting, I think, especially because you can't control where you are a lot of the time, especially when you're a kid. You know, your parents move wherever, you can't control that. But if you have the internet, then obviously, you know, that opens up in a lot of ways, and you can find a community for you. And for me, the esports community was one of those, and you know, like you'll be able to experience shortly here as well with the because the major quarterfinals are going on right now. The gaming community that turn up to these events are always amazing. The fans are great. Like it's you know, you never really get any, you know, you don't get like these, it's not like football fans, you know, nothing against football fans, also very nice ones, but you don't have that culture of like, you know, rowdiness in like a negative sense, where people get too drunk and like, you know, fights happen and just things get messy, you know. The fans like really love the game, and you can really feel the passion, and it's really cool for me, especially as a final note, because I was really there right from before it was a thing, and so seeing it from right before it was a thing, and then being able to take part in kind of delivering through the microphone, you know, my passion and, you know, of what's going on to, you know, these arenas where there's, you know, thousands of people in the arena, and I'm like, oh, these people are all connecting over the same thing as me, and you know, it's really cool.
And you know, since you already touched on it, I do want to ask, what was it like from playing professionally and then working as a commentator? What are some things that helped you in your current position, and what are some things that you had to get used to?
So the thing that you have to get used to first, which sucks, is that if in my position when I went to commentary, I ended up commentating a lot of people that I'm like, I can beat that guy. You know, I've beaten that guy. You know, so it's like, God damn it, like I should be playing. Right. And so that's one of the tough things, is you kind of have to let go of being a player a little bit. So that's one of the first hard transitions. Not all commentators are coming from that background, but I was. So that was one thing for me. However, the other thing too that was really helpful was, for me, I loved competition because of how it is such a good vector for self-improvement, where to me, I'm like, I want to get better. That's my goal. I want to beat everyone. And so, you know, my greatest rivals are my best friends. They're essentially holding up the mirror to me in a match, and they're showing how they're beating me. They're saying, these are your weaknesses. You better go and work on it. And so, you know, there's this like beautiful poetry to the rivalries in that from that perspective. And with commentary, it's a little bit different because you don't have that, you know, we're not like, I'm not going out there and, you know, I'm beating someone else, so you're kind of having to have that competition with yourself to some extent, and you're having to, you know, really be analytical, much like in the way that you would, you know, get better if as a player in general, trying to practice and improve yourself. You know, you can apply all of that stuff into the commentary, which is what I did, and that was how I was able to get better over time. And when I started, there wasn't many examples of how to do it. So I had to do a lot of analysis and you know, look at all the other commentators that had been there before me, and in times when things were a bit smaller, and see, okay, what are the best parts of what they do, and how does that work, and you know, how do I sound good, and so just I treated it like a competition, even though, you know, it wasn't quite the same.
Yeah, that's really cool that you mentioned like the dynamic being like poetry. I know for you, it's like you have those two different worlds, the two different perspectives, and so someone who's watching can be like, well, if I want to go in this direction, I can see like what it looks like, what it could feel like to be in this position, or even if you want to go more of the commentator route. And so it's interesting to hear like, how do you separate yourself from what you used to be or what you used to do, but how do I like include the fun bits about it and like have that little side that maybe other people don't have. And so it's like a cool perspective that you have. And I also want to ask, you know, could you tell us a little bit more about working with Face It or even Turner Sports as companies?
Yeah, so Face It was a company where, so I'm no longer with them, but I was with them for about 8 years, and it was really interesting because, again, we started off with really nothing. We started off from like a co-working space in Milan where during the nighttime we'd run a broadcast, and we push all of the desks together to like set up the production computers and all the cameras and everything, and we'd run the broadcast out of that. And then, you know, moving from that, with the company, I became kind of the face of the company with regards to I was just on all of their broadcasts for a long time, and so I helped to grow the creative product as well. We had a lot of creative control myself, and my co-commentator that I worked together a lot with, James Bardoff at the time, and so that was it was a really cool experience to have the ownership of this broadcast product when no one really knew again what they were doing, but it was really successful and people really loved it, and so it's really fun to have that experience. And then that was something that was mine with Face It, but whereas going to like Turner Sports, that was there's been a lot of different companies I've worked with, but that's been the only one I would say that is a super well established production house that's got nothing to do with esports, and it's like, oh, but we're going to do some esports, we're going to bring you in. And so having that contrast of experience from the esports world, which is all grassroots and endemic stuff, of course, into Turner Sports was really crazy, because obviously they built like a brand new top of the line studio just for the products, for the esports product called E-League, and it's funny because we had some of the talent from inside the NBA and some of the basketball players they would have in will come in and look to check out the new studio, and they're kind of like, guys, like, why do they have a better, cooler studio than us? Because it's like this amazing 360-degree studio. It had like this like desk that would actually move throughout the it's crazy. Yeah, it was really expensive, and after the first season, they cut most of those expenses. So
that's enough.
Apparently, it turned out it was actually more effective for them to run reruns of Big Bang Theory at that time slot. So over time, it didn't work out, but they tried it, and it was really cool to have that professional treatment, to feel like the talent, like the inside the NBA talent, like get the same treatment as they would get. It was really, really cool and unique experience, and it was sad because ultimately, Turner were trying to get ahead of the curve. They were looking at all the demographics, and they're saying, okay, look, where is this demographic going? Of like the 10 to 30 year olds, like where is that going? And everyone was asking that question because it is disappearing, and all the networks are like wondering, how do we recapture this audience? So they were looking at Twitch, they were looking at the gaming space, and like, okay, well, this seems to be where they're going. So can we kind of capture that? And I think it turns out that, because I'll let you know as well, from an esports perspective, for many years we felt like we needed to be good enough for like the mainstream, like Turner Sports, but it kind of turned out that actually no, we were just our own thing, and that was good enough all along, and we didn't have to do that, and I think that was kind of good proof of that, and so it's cool to have that experience. It seems like now if you look at like where we are with like the high level productions from like Blast, who are running this major, and EFG and a lot of the others, the level is really crazy. Like it's very, very high level now. It's not Turner Sports, it's not like Warner Brothers money, but it's still like very, very good. So esports is really finding its own identity now, and I think owning it a lot more than it used to.
And so with that being said, like, what do you see the future of esports looking like, and what do you want that to look like in your career, and what you want to do with your placement in esports?
It's a great question. I want a lot for esports.
And that's
the first thing I think that I want for esports is I definitely want there just to be more stability and less volatility. I think one of the big issues that we have in the space is that the teams and the tournament organizers as well don't have the same avenues to make revenues as we do in traditional sports. With people don't buy merch in the same way, you don't sell tickets in the same way, you don't sell broadcast rights in the same way, and these are some of the biggest ways that teams and the tournaments will make money. And so we don't really have that, and also the audience isn't really willing to pay for stuff in general. Like they're not willing to pay for a pass to access all the games and so on. So it's we're in kind of a tricky spot where that monetization hasn't really been figured out, and we recently experienced a sort of bursting of the bubble where, again, if you look at esports, the growth is unbelievable. It's it's crazy how many people are doing it, and so you had a lot of venture capital that get flooded into the market, and a lot of that venture capital got just completely destroyed and burned, and so that really, I think, has now scared off a lot of potential future investors. So we just need smarter money. We need better and more innovative business solutions, I think. So that's, I'm hoping that is one of the things that gets figured out, and once we have that stability, we're going to be able to, I think, be a better place for players. I think we can integrate better with the collegiate system. I think that's something that also would be really great, because we would have a better and more professionalized pipeline to develop talent that I think is everyone can agree with. They can get an education, they can also make money, they can have more social experiences. We can also have solve another problem where currently, if you're a professional player, you start out and you're in your bedroom and you get really good, and then suddenly you get a big contract that's, here's like $20,000 a month, and now you're going to move to play, maybe in some, different city, and now everything's all professional, and you're working with all these coaches and performance staff, and you've never experienced anything like that. You've just gone from your bedroom to that, and so that's a very challenging aspect for talent development, because in traditional sports, you're going to be getting coaching and you're going to be exposed to that sort of thing from a very young age. And so that's another problem we want to solve. So I'd love to solve those problems, but there's many more. But as far as like for my career, I love both the performance aspects as well as telling the stories and being involved and being able to kind of translate the high level action and my passion and help that to infuse and enrich the fan experience, so that a fan can connect more and can enjoy what they love more. And I love doing that. But when I was working as a general manager and essentially trying to solve novel problems as well, because again in esports it's very different to traditional sports, but there are some objective crossovers, things that that we do need to be doing that aren't happening right now, and I wanted to solve those problems to help to nurture talent and grow them more effectively, to be able to solve performance problems in ways that haven't been done just yet. And there's lots of stuff I want to do on that end. So I have a business that I just started where instead of trying to take a super long-term contract as a general manager again, I'm trying to instead more incisively solve teams problems by applying my own systems and models for performance, and by looking at what teams are in crisis right now, and then reaching out to them and say, hey, this is, if we entered into a contract, this is kind of how I would help to navigate and resolve and diagnose the issues that your team currently has and what I've seen. So that's kind of, so I can kind of do both at the same time, because if I just do one thing, I won't be able to do the other. So I'm trying to like figure out, how do I get both? How do I get, have my cake and eat it too?
And what's the name of your company, if you don't mind asking?
It's just me right now. So it's just really just everything would be under my business, which is just my DDK Esports LLC, I guess. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
And then I do have to ask, with you being so into esports and like being here a commentator, a player, I do want to know, what is the game that like got you into esports, or what is the game that just impacted you greatly? So
it would be Quake 3, which is, that game came out in 1999, which is the same year that Counter-Strike was in its betas, but I was always playing Counter-Strike 2, but that was the game where I played that and I was immediately kind of obsessed.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's really cool. I did a little research and I did see that was the game. So, just making sure you knew. But yeah, that's basically it. Do you have anything that you want to add on or say?
No, I don't think. Well, I guess what I'll say is, I think again, the biggest thing for me with esports is I love the aspect of self-improvement that I get from it, and not everyone is going to be gaming for that reason, but I found that because I wanted to win, it was unavoidable to have to go down that path. And so for me, I think for anyone that is interested in esports, you can also take that path by just trying to improve. You don't have to just like play with your friends and just not work on anything, but you can go and work on stuff. And because I know a lot of players that they get frustrated with losing, but they don't realize that they can actually sit down and just be like, oh, what should I try to work on? How can I try to work on that? And they don't realize the reward that they may be able to get from doing it, and how addicting that could be. So yeah, and I think that's really important, because a lot of video games these days, especially, I think this is like I think what people are really afraid of with video games is that they're very addicting, and the developers are so good at like punching all your dopamine switches, and there's lots of games where you're not getting a return from that. Of any kind of growth, but if you do something competitively, even if it's a game that's a bit more casual, there are lots of ways to challenge yourself, lots of ways to learn, lots of ways to think that can transfer into your life in other beneficial ways. So that's kind of like what I guess maybe the message I'll leave off with.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for letting us interview you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course.